Welcome to Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel. This is Diana Mall Halstead, the Kriege's daughter. In the industrial heart of Flint, Michigan, a young man looked beyond the familiar streets and factory skylines toward a world that he had only imagined. His name was Michael Morrow, and he wanted to see more. That choice set him on a path that would carry him far beyond Flint, across continents, through combat zones, into the halls of command, and into the pages of military history. He entered the United States Army as a young private, armed not with privilege, but with skill, discipline, and a fierce determination to rise. He became an engineer, a surveyor, a soldier who would master airborne and ranger training, a man entrusted with missions at the very core of Cold War strategy. From Fort Knox to Hawaii's rugged mountains, from nuclear demolition units in Europe to the front lines of Desert Storm, Michael Morrow lived the journey he once dreamed about. Over the course of 32 years, he climbed from the lowest enlisted ranks to full colonel, leading with precision and purpose. And when his military chapter ended, he didn't slow down. He returned home, bringing with him leadership forged over a lifetime of service, becoming a mentor, a voice for his community, and eventually the mayor of Grafton, Illinois. This is more than one man's story. It is a journey of vision, courage, and unwavering commitment to something greater than oneself. Michael, welcome to Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel.
Thank you, Diana.
Just to start out, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Flint, Michigan.
What brought you down here to Grafton?
Well, I lived in Flint, Michigan ever since I was born up until I was about 22 years old, maybe 23, and then I went in the United States Army, and that's what got me out of Flint.
What was your family dynamic up there?
Family dynamic is that I was the oldest of six. I had four brothers and one sister. There were six of us, and my father was a fireman. He worked in the Flint Fire Department, station number 3. And my mother was a homemaker. She came from a farm in Chesaning, Michigan, which is right about in the middle of Michigan, Flint, just about maybe 25 miles from Flint. And my mom and dad met in 1950 when they went to a dance.
Was it like a school dance or?
No, it was one of those after World War II where they had, it was real popular going to the dance communities and so forth. So that's what they just met like that.
Where did you go to high school?
Went to high school at St. Agnes. It was in the northwest section of Flint, and Catholic school. It was built in the right after World War II, so it was in its heyday in the 50s and the 60s. The last class went through there. I graduated in 1969. My brother was a year behind me, and he graduated in 1970, and then the last class was 1971. And then they went to an all consolidated school, Catholic school, Power School, which was someplace out. I'd left by that point.
After high school, where did you go?
Well, it's interesting because what I did was I left the home when I was 18, and I went and moved into an apartment down in Flint. And I was working at the auto factory to get money to go to college. And so what I was going to do, I went to Mott Community College, and I got an associate's degree in mechanical design technology. And so I was working there, but my job at the factory stopped that fall in 1969. Right after I got out of high school, I worked there for about 6 months. And then that job went away because they changed changeover models and so forth. And so I got a job with the city of Flint as a draftsman. I took drafting in high school. I could draft. And so I said, well, let me try this out. So I went down. I was interviewed by Mr. Parati, who was the head engineer. And he said, this is great. We're going to hire you on board, start full-time tomorrow morning. And I went, ooh, I'm going to college. He says, we'll work around your schedule. So I went to college full-time, worked full-time, didn't have much time for anything else, but I did get that, and I graduated. And the day I graduated college I went down and joined the Army.
If you're a draftsman, you have to have some technical ability to draw?
Yes, you got to be drawn to it, in other words. Back in those days, today people use computers to do CAD drawings and other things. They just just draw it like that. Back in those days, we had pencils, pens, sharpen them, and you had to do all your thinking and drawing and designing on the paper itself, not on the computer. So you did the work. And if you made a mistake, crunkle it up, start over again, or erase it if you could and redo it. But In grade school, I loved to sketch and doodle and that type of thing. So I drew all the way through school. I kept all my artwork and so forth, that I could see how I progressed. And what drew me into drafting, I took a class, my last senior class in high school was drafting, is because I loved drawing. So I went into that and I loved drafting. And the two just kind of fit.
In college, what were you doing?
Well, it was a standard course. It was a mechanical design technology. So in other words, we took hydraulics, mathematics, drafting, more drawing, and you weren't really designing anything, but you're the guy that's, for example, one of our class teachers would say, do well here and you can get a job with AC spark plug. I'm thinking that's the last thing I want to do is draw spark plugs for the rest of my life, But that's what a draftsman does. I mean, they take the designs and they take the plans and they make them into real. Just like today, when an architect designs a home, the guy that's building it makes that drawing come real.
Was this a 4-year college or
2-year
college?
Got a 2-year degree, associate's degree in mechanical design. And then I had a decision to make because, again, I'm on my own now, and I'm, thinking I love the city, but I'd learned that there really wasn't any progression up, and I had this desire to keep moving up. As there was only 3 people in our section. I was the low man on the totem pole, so I was the draftsman. The guy next to me was Lonnie. He was 30 years old, and his job was to work with Lou, the old man, that basically was the surveyor, the head draftsman, all the other things. And so one day I remember I told Lonnie, I says, well, Lonnie, I says, when Lou retires, because this guy, we sat at our desk and he'd chain smoke, Oh, this is back in the old days. And so I said, when Lou retires, that means you move to his job and I get your job? And he goes, no, kid, it don't work that way. And I said, what do you mean? He says, when Lou retires, they'll run an ad in the Flint Journal and we'll probably get 200 people apply. They'll have degrees and all this. We won't even have a chance. I'm thinking, I don't want to be, I liked it there. I loved working what I was doing, but I didn't want to sit there and do the same thing for the rest of my life. So the second thing I always wanted to do was join the Army. So I says, you know what? I got my degree. It's time to go do my thing.
You always wanted to join the Army?
Ever since I was a kid. Because, well, it was just, my father was in the Navy in World War II. And I admired that. And he never really talked about it. It was a lot of veterans never do. I see his Navy uniform in the closet. Never really knew what he went through until I had my first combat tour. And then we both chatted. So he inspired me. And then all of the men in our neighborhood were veterans back home. And they, just quiet, unassuming. You never, they never even said it, but you knew. And so I was drawn to that. And then back in the 50s, if you remember all the Class B movies that came out with the monsters, well, who saved the day? The Army. They were always out there rolling in, doing something, and the giant ants in Los Angeles and the storm drains are driving through the Jeeps and the tunnels and stuff. This is great. I got to be an Army guy. And so I always wanted to do that. So,
did you ever see a giant ant?
Actually, I saw what they call a cow killer one time. They're about this big and they're orange with fur and they're basically a hornet, but it's an ant. And I made the mistake of picking it up and it bit me and my whole arm went, ah. You can get enough of them on a cow, it kills them. They got a powerful sting. The Army it was my time to go in and try that out. So I said, I think I'll go down and do it. So I walked into the recruiter's office. Now, this was 1971 in June. Just graduated 1971 and the staff sergeant, I can still see this young guy, came up to me and they were kind of fighting who was going to get me because Vietnam was hot and moving. People weren't really wanting to go. And here I am walking in the door. So he grabbed me and he says, well, what do you want to do and everything? And I said, well, I just graduated Mott College. Oh, doing what? And I told him and he says, he said, you sound like you want to be an engineer. I said, well, what is that? And so he showed me this little video. These guys are running around on the battlefield, bulldozers and all this stuff. I said, well, that sounds pretty neat. Yeah, I'll try that. So what happened was, since I had a skill, and when I was at the water department, Lou, the old man, he taught me how to survey. Because, again, I always wanted to move up. So instead of being the guy just pounding the stakes all the time, I'd say, can you teach me? And he says, yeah. So he taught me how to set up the level, how to do the transit. He taught me how to take the shots, how to do the mathematics. And I'd keep the book and everything for him. And he'd be standing there with his cigarette hanging out like that and going, yeah, that looks good. Okay. And then I'd go back and I'd draw it up, which I loved. And so when I told the staff sergeant that, he goes, wow, he says, you might, we've got a, he goes like this, and he looks, we got a program here. We're looking for people like you that got skills. And instead of coming in as a private, we might get you in as a spec 4. And I said, what's that? He goes, well, that's like an E4, like a corporal. He said, it's a good deal. He says, you get more money. Then I said, wow. He said, but you got to go to Detroit and you got to interview with a colonel. He says, he's big, colonel's in charge of all this stuff. And he'll interview you. He's in charge of the district and all that. And if he decides that you're qualified, then we can enter you into this program. I said, I'll do it. So I went down to Detroit, found my way, found parking, got up into this building, and I'm dressed like a bum, just out of college. So I go in there, and this secretary, she says, a beautiful ornate office, in a federal building. And so they finally usher me into this colonel. He's sitting behind his desk. He's got all his medals on and stuff, and very intimidating. So I sat down. I'm kind of looking at him. He goes, well, tell me a little about yourself. And so we did. We chatted, and he started asking me questions on survey setups and bang, bang, bang. How would you do this? Laid it all out. He said, okay. So he starts, it must have been about 15 minutes. Then he starts writing out like this. And he says, I'm going to go ahead and recommend you to be a spec 5. And I went, whoa, 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 whoa. And he stopped and he looked and I says, the sergeant back at that station said I could be an E4. And he laughed and he says, I didn't know. He says, 4 or 5, 4 is better than 5. He goes, no. He says, trust me, this is better. So I went back, and the next day took us into the sergeant, and he goes, how'd you do? I said, I did okay, I think. And he says, I gave him the paper, and he goes, oh my gosh, you can be spec 5. And I says, is that good? He goes, oh my God, kid, that's great. He says, that's a sergeant, Sergeant E5, spec 5, specialist 5th class. Says, oh. So I finished up all my testing and everything and that, and I was getting ready, and they were going to send me on the bus then to basic training. And the sergeant pulled me off, and he says, now I'm going to tell you one thing. He said, you got to do this. He says, you got to trust me. He says, you can't tell anybody that you're going to be promoted to spec 5. I said, why? He said, because if you do, they'll dog you, they'll run you out, and your life will be miserable. He said, you just go in there and be a dummy. He said, we've got your orders up here at headquarters. They don't know about it down there, this program and everything. One hand doesn't know the other, right? And so I said, okay, I'll keep my mouth shut, which I did. All through basic. Tell anybody. I enjoyed basic training, and it was one of those things that it was challenging, but it was also too, again, you find I had that spark. I wanted to keep moving up. So
so you felt the Army in you.
Always, yes.
Yeah.
It was one of those that, I even tell kids today, if you don't know what the heck you want to do, go join the service. Yeah. Go join the military, the Army. Go be a police officer. Go be a firefighter. Serve your country, your community. So I felt that pride that was there. And of course, everything then was Vietnam and all this and that. And so we went through basic training, did very well. I got to be an acting squad leader. Some guys screwed up because they always do every day. And then they promote the next guy up. And I got to stay, I stayed like that till the end. So
what did you like about basic training?
The discipline. I like the fact that to this day, I still get up at 5 o'clock every morning, even on Sunday. The discipline. You took a kid that was having fun doing things, but knowing you want to do something better, and they put it into you. And the other thing I liked about it was that if they saw that spark in you, or because there was always somebody there to mentor you, and if they look and they saw that you wanted to do it, you could do it, they would help you do it. They would guide you and they would help you. And the sky's the limit.
You spent 8 weeks in basic training?
Yeah, something like that. I forget what it was. It was regular basic training, and then I was going to get ready to go to my AIT, which at that point was a surveying school, and then for that. So anyway, the funny story was in graduation day in basic, Drill Sergeant Miller, Staff Sergeant, and Sergeant Sturgis. Sturgis was the bad guy, Miller was the good guy, and I can still see these two guys to this day, and God bless them. They were great. And what they do is you find out they switched the next cycle, like it's Miller was, and I'm thinking, I couldn't see that. Miller was always the good guy. I couldn't see him. Anyway, so I'm getting ready to graduate. We're getting our greens on and all that. And drill sergeant, they were going to come through and promote something like 1% or something of the class with E2, which was a stripe that went up like that. And so he goes, and he comes to me, he goes, Morrow, and he throws these stripes on my bunk. He says, sew them on. Well, I did the first dumb thing ever. I picked up those stripes and I went over to him. I said, Sergeant Miller, drill sergeant, I won't need these. He looked at me, what? He's, I'm getting promoted to Spec 5. Oh my. He chewed me out. So I sewed him up. So now we're out in formation. And everybody's getting their orders to where they're going and that. I'm standing out in the company street and I just kind of look a big dummy. I don't know what's going on yet. And all of a sudden, the senior drill sergeant comes out with the first sergeant and they go up to this little stand where they're all standing up there. And they're reading this. Oh, I can't believe you can hear on their microphones. Why can't this can't be? That's Morrow. I go running up there, right? And they get up and they promote me right there to Spec 5 in front of everybody. And they were so mad because they didn't understand what was going on, but they had the orders, right? And this is a special program. Throw your bags, and your school's been canceled. Throw your bags back into the barracks and go report for KP. Okay. Now you gotta understand, I was just promoted to the equivalent of a sergeant. And in front of everybody, I was told, what a dirtbag I was, but also too, to throw my bags back in and go to KP. They're going, oh my God. So I ran over and did that. And I go up to the door to give a report to the mess hall. And the kid that's in the mess hall, the highest ranking kid in there is a Spec 4. I outrank him. But I didn't know that. I'm still a private up here, right? So I walk in the door and he goes, yes, what can I do for you? A specialist. I goes, I'm here for KP. What did you do? I'm going, nothing. I just graduated. They told me to come here. And he goes, okay, well, he's looking at me. He says, well, what would you like to do? I says, can I be the DRO? Which was the dining room orderly, the guy that gives the milk, thing. He goes, you can do anything you want. And I'm going, it's great. I found out that my class that I was supposed to go to for the next AIT class it was canceled. And so they pulled me into the headquarters and they said, okay, here's the deal. You've got two choices. We'll process your paperwork right now and discharge you and you can go home. I said, I just got here. I don't want to go home. And so they said, or the only thing we can fit you into is you can go to a non-commissioned officer academy, which is 9 months long. I said, I'll go to that. So, which I didn't realize at the time was BNOC, Basic Non-Commissioned Officer Course, which you don't get to go to until you're like 2 or 3 years in the military. So this was a big deal. So anyway, there's a corporal that was there living in the barracks with me for a while because he was a Vietnam veteran going back into the military. He got out and was coming back. He pulled me off the side and he says, Morrow, he says, they're going to get rid of you. You got to get your stuff together. He says, I'm going to take you under my wing, which he did. And he taught me how to handle things, how to do things. And, basically you're in charge. Act like you're in charge. He says, first thing we're going to do is go to the NCO club. Sounds good to me. So off we went down, drank down at the NCO club, taught me how to do all this stuff. And if it wasn't for Corporal Peterson, I'd have probably got drummed out with the rest of them because there was nobody there taking care of the duds. I was supposed to be the guy taking care of the holdovers. So that finished up and I finally got to ship out and shipped out to my course, which was in Fort Belvoir, Virginia, which was a non-commissioned officer basic course. And that was 9 months. And the course was all Spec 5s. I think there's probably about 60, 70 of us. And we filled up a big, beautiful barracks. And it wasn't like the old barracks there, but this was, we had nice bunks, all this stuff to ourselves and everything. And on the evenings and in the weekends, we could go into Washington, D.C., go on leave, and not leave, but just, to act like we're regular people. And that course taught us how to be non-commissioned officers. It taught us how I went through everything in the gambit of engineering, from plumbing, construction, electrical, to demolitions, to rifle range, to all different types of, learning how to do booby traps. The best thing I ever did, I love to do, is demolition. So we did a lot of that. So it was a great course and it set me up for the remainder of my career. The engineering advanced course and the officer course and the basic officer course and the non-commissioned officer course all were at Fort Belvoir, Virginia in those days. And it wasn't until later that they moved it to Fort Leonard Wood.
Where did you go to basic training?
Fort Knox, Kentucky. And from there, If you're going to be an adjutant or you're going to the finance corps, you go Fort Jackson. Some go to Fort McClellan for MPs. At that point, it was going to Fort Belvoir, Virginia for the engineers. And they also had engineer officer basic course and all that there. So
what's the difference in an NCO and an officer?
NCO stands for non-commissioned officer. An
Right.
officer is a commissioned officer. So in other words, commissioned by the president. So that you have basically you serve at the will of the president.
And as an NCO, you serve at the will of
You
who?
have to reenlist. So in other words, officer, you stay, you come in, you're there, and you stay until they either throw you out or you decide to get out. As a non-commissioned officer or enlisted person, you have to re-enlist every 2 to 3 years. In some cases, when I first enlisted, I enlisted for, I think it was 3 years or 4 years or something. And then you have to, when your time comes up, you either get out or you re-enlist again. And that gives them an opportunity to let you re-enlist or send you home.
Did you stay NCO the whole time?
Actually, I got promoted again. So when I was the Spec 5 there, we graduated there. And my first duty assignment, the sergeant major that night came up to us at the end of our course, and he gave everybody in the barracks orders for Vietnam. So I went, okay, we're going to Vietnam. And the next morning, he came through, and the sergeant major said, pulled all the orders, said, we're canceling those, because this now is in the middle of 72. And Vietnam was on the downcline. So he said, we've canceled all these orders. We got other orders for you. And they started passing out the other orders. And he got to me and he goes, Morrow, and he held my orders like that. And he goes, I'm going to make you a deal. He says, we want to keep you here as an instructor to do the surveying and all the engineering. I thought, wow, that sounds great, because I liked it there and everything. And he says, and I said, well, where were my orders for? And he goes, well, so I looked and I said, 25th Infantry Division, Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. That's what I went. Ooh, Hawaii. I think I'm going to go here, Sergeant Major. All right. First assignment was overseas in Hawaii. Now, Hawaii, it sounds like it is God's paradise. And back in 72, when I got there, it was wonderful. I imagine it's pretty crowded today. I had a ball, but it was a lot of work too.
Were there still the rumblings of Pearl Harbor there when you went? Or were you not?
Let me tell you, I was in the barracks that, they were just doing the memorial for the Arizona. Mm-hmm. And the barracks that we stayed in, I-Quad, were some of the barracks they filmed for the movie Burt Lancaster. This was the one where he was in Hawaii. He was a first sergeant. They filmed that at that barracks. And the bullet holes from the Japanese planes were still in the barracks. You could still see them that they were there. It was like going back into time. The Hawaii was gorgeous, but we worked. I went to Recondo school. I went to all different kinds of schools. I told my wife when I got married that I'd volunteer for every course that they had. You want to do it? I'll do that. I'll go. So after I was there, I got promoted to staff sergeant. Now, the funniest part was when we first walked in the door to this 25th, I remember I met this guy on the bus taking us to Schofield, and he was also Spec 5, and his name was Phil Natel. I still remember him, and nice Italian guy from up in the Bronx and everything, and he was a registered surveyor, the real thing. I was a guy that learned by my seat of my pants and how to do it, didn't have degrees or anything. Found out we were both going for the same job. And I thought, oh man, here we go. So we get in there and we report to the first sergeant, and First Sergeant Leo D'Artez, never forget him, big guy. And he's sitting there behind his desk. We come in, First Sergeant, here we are, and you got our orders. Now I hear this. And I looked, and there's a guy behind his desk laying on the floor. He's got him hogtied. And so he says, that's Tom. He said, he's sleeping it off, because what he does is he gets drunk and, so forth. So finally he untied. He said, you ready to go to work, Tom? Yes, First Sergeant. Go off he went. And so we're standing there, and he says, all right, guys, here's the deal. I got 2 jobs. One job is the surveyor in charge of the survey and all that stuff. This is what we both wanted over in the S3 shop. And the other job is my company clerk. And I'm going, I can't type, number one. And I don't want nothing to do with being a company clerk. So he says, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let Captain Short over there in the S3 section, he's going to make the decision. And whatever he decides, the other one comes to me. So I'm thinking, oh man, am I going to get hosed on this? So we went, put all our stuff up. The next day, we both went over to the S3 section to report to Captain Short. And Captain Short was true to his word. He was a short little guy. He had big pop bottle glasses and sitting behind his desk. And when we walked in, I noticed that he was reading a comic book. So I put that in the back there, and he put it down like that. It was Superman. And so we come to the desk, and he says, all right, he says, one of you guys is going to be the da-da-da-da. He talked to each of us for a little bit, and he goes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you guys go out and do a project and then come back. Whoever's got the right answer and all that can get the job. So that sounds fair. And he says, you're going to have to go draw a vehicle down there because I want you to go. The project is go to the Kootree Reservoir, which was you got to find your way up there, number one. Huge reservoir. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to put in a slide for life. So they wanted to know how high the rope had to be, where it was secured, how long a rope, blah, 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 all this other stuff. And I thought, man. So I went down, and we both had to do it on separate days. So Phil went and did his thing. I went and did mine. Got a vehicle, went up there, go by myself. I think I took one guy with me. I had to have a guy to hold the tape and do other things, but I'm thinking, how am I going to do this? And so anyway, I went back and worked on it that night. Next day we go in. The two of us go into Captain Short's desk. He's sitting there. He's got this stack of comic books. And he goes, okay. Turn to Phil. He says, what is it? So Phil starts telling him, the captain just ordered bacon and eggs. And Phil's telling him how you crack the eggs and cook this, just doing all this stuff, going blah, 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 blah. And I could see that the captain's eyes have glazed over. And he's already well beyond what he knows. I mean, Phil was a smart guy. He had it down to the perfection. It took him maybe 15 minutes. And finally the captain, okay, turns to me and he says, now, what about you? I said, you need 350, whatever it was, rope. You need this to do it. Boom. He looked, why'd you do that? Okay, you stay. Phil, go see the first sergeant. The thing was, Phil was probably suited because he typed like a genius. So not only could he serve, but he typed. So he and the first sergeant got along great. I got along great in the S3 section with Sergeant Mack and the guys. And, the rest was history. Then I got promoted to staff sergeant right then after that for a platoon sergeant. And I loved what I was doing. I loved it.
How long were you there?
I was there for just 3, almost 4 years. And first job I had was up in the Cahuca Mountains where they had a helicopter cut somebody's head off. And they wanted to know because it landed on an angle on a hill. And it came in when they jumped out, his head got cut off. So what's the angle? What's the rest? And where, so we had to go out. And told Rod, man, put it right there where his head was, boom, and then start doing all the rest of the stuff, try to figure out, what went wrong, accident investigation. So, and we had a lot of training and so forth. Now, those were also the days that Vietnam was drawing down, and all the people were coming through Schofield and other places. A lot of drugs, a lot of terrible fights with, race fights and so forth. It was pretty bad. As a staff duty NCO, when I do it, you'd have to carry a loaded gun. Not that we ever had to use it, but, always the officer had a gun, we had a gun. It was just one of those that it was a tough time in the military, people getting out and things being downturned. And if you remember, even back in the States, people were told, when you land in California, take your uniform off, you get spit on. So we lived through that. During that time frame, I got married. That's a story in itself because when I was getting ready to make staff sergeant, I had to go back to a non-commissioned officer course. So I went to the one which was local in Schofield Barracks. And there was, I think, 60 of us in that course, all Spec 5s or that type of thing, or Spec 4 getting promoted to sergeant. And there were only 2 females. These 2 ladies came from Camp Zama, Japan. They had them flown in to go to the NCO course because they were getting ready to be promoted. They were with the Women's Army Corps. Back then in those days, they were WACs. So they came in, had their own uniforms and all that. And of course, 60 guys and 2 women, everybody's gaga. And so you understand, I came from a very active social life back when I was back in the States. And I got to Hawaii and the brakes went on. It's like, this is terrible. So anyway, but it had nothing to do because these 2 ladies were gorgeous. Well, I put my sights on the one and never got an opportunity to talk to her because every break, these guys would be around her. After about maybe a week and a half, finally, because it didn't seem like anybody was getting anywhere. So finally there was a break. Nobody went by her. So I walked up and made my move. And I said, I understand you're new to the islands, you're TDY from Camp Zama and don't have transportation. Would you care to see the islands with me this weekend? Little did I know I was the one getting hooked. We had a very wonderful, swirling romance for about the next 5 weeks, and we got married before she left to go back to Camp Zama. And I'm standing there going, what the heck did I just do?
So you knew her for 5 weeks,
Yep.
got married, and she shipped out.
Yep, had to go back to Zama.
Jiminy.
Oh yeah, it was terrible. So, and our whole time we were together like that seemed to be like I'd get one place and then she'd come, and then I'd go to another, then she'd come, and so she went to Zama. Then she came back. They transferred her back over after about 6 months, and we set up house in the government housing in the enlisted areas and had a ball there, had a good time. And then it was time to move to the States. So I went to the 864th Engineers in Fort Lewis, Washington, back in the time before they were what they are today. And of course, she stayed back there because she was in the top secret area doing communications and codes and so forth. And she made staff sergeant. So we were both staff sergeants at that point. So anyways, I got to Fort Stewart up here in Tacoma, Washington. She followed again, like about 6 months. We bought a house and worked there together. And then that's where I met Command Sergeant Major Stone. Now, at this whole time, I'm a platoon sergeant. I'm enjoying life. I love what I'm doing. And my goal at that time was to become Command Sergeant Major of the Army, be the top enlisted guy. Well, Sergeant Major Stone called me in one day, and he was sitting there, and he had this big, long guide on staff, and he had a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, and he had a piece of glass, and he's scraping off the varnish, getting ready to varnish the staffs because we had a big parade coming up, and he's doing this. And I imagine it was one of his comfort things because he probably did that when he was a young private. They had him do it, and he just, we do the things that we learned to do. So he called me in and he says, Sergeant Morrow, he says, what are you doing here? I said, well, Sergeant Major, you called for me. No, damn it, not that. He says, I mean, what are you doing here? He says, look around you. He says, what do you see? He says, all these lieutenants that we have, you're smarter than they are. He says, you're better than they are. He says, you need to go to officer candidate school. And I said, oh man, I don't know, Sergeant Major. He said, he says, no. He says, trust me on this. You need to go. You got to take a PT test. You got to do all these tests and that. And I'm going to, so he taught me to do it and passed my PT test. I passed, that had fun with those days. Then I had to pass a written test. Then I had to pass an interview with all these officers and everything. They bring in, grill you, and ask all these questions. Well, I got selected. Yay. But again, now that means now I'm leaving my wife again. She's going to stay at Fort Lewis. At that point, I was going to head off then to officer candidate school. So I was gone for a year now this time. So I went to OCS, Fort Benning, Georgia. From Fort Benning, Georgia, OCS, I went to airborne school. Then I went to Ranger school. I had about a week in between after the Ranger school graduation before my officer basic course started. And so they said, you want to go to atomic demolition munitions school? And I said, that sounds fun. They said, it is. So I went to atomic ADM school. And I filled that 2-week gap, and then I went to my officer basic course, and then I went to my first duty assignment as an officer, which was in Leonard Wood, Missouri. I walked in as a training officer in a company down there, basic training company, and had a ball with it.
About what year was this?
1977. And then she followed me. Well, actually, she didn't follow me quite yet. We're still trying to get together when I got a phone call one day from her. We talked quite a bit. Didn't have cell phones and all that stuff. No. Called me in my office, and she says, I just been to the hospital. Now, you got to understand, I just got out of Ranger school. And so I just gotten into my duty assignment. It's now about 2 months. And she says, I was coming in for a procedure, and I found out I'm pregnant. I said, oh my gosh, Ranger baby, right? And I says, because we've been trying.
In between all the schools.
Yeah, whenever we got together again. And so she says, but I don't know if I want to keep it. And because she said, in those days, if you were pregnant, you had to get out. No ifs, ands, or buts. They discharge you. And so here she is. She's a staff sergeant. She's got a career in the top secret crypto world of communications and so on. She enjoys what she does and everything. She met this guy over in Hawaii. We got married. We're still can't even stay together. So anyway, she says, I'm going to pray about it tonight. And I said, okay. So we prayed, and I told her, I said, man, I want this baby. And so the next morning she called and she says, we're keeping the baby. Because what they did was they went in, there was a cancer scare. They went in to do a hysterectomy. And so they said, oh, you're pregnant. So they couldn't do that. So we worked around that. So 9 months later, Christopher was born, our only son. I tell him he's the one and only, because after that she had to have the hysterectomy. And then she finally comes to Fort Leonard Wood, where I'm at. We have set up shop over in government housing again. And
did she have to leave the military?
Yes, she got out. Yeah, got out, became house mom, and raised our son, and did all the officer wives things. And it was, she truly enjoyed it. Plus, I think it gave her an edge up on all the other at that time, because you had a lot of women that weren't in the military. She was kind of the queen bee of the roost, you know.
This was in 77, and then where did you go?
Well, 77, I finished up
Fort Leonard Wood, right?
Fort Leonard Wood. I went on to be a company commander there, and then I was the general's aide, selected to do that. So that was really neat. For about a year, got to do that and see how the higher ups work. And I mean, the general I was with, he'd say, write my OERs, do this. I mean, because I could write. So I'd end up doing a lot of his work, and which I loved. Of course, he'd redo it, but draft it up for him. I learned quite a bit from him. So from there, then I went to the officer advanced course back to Fort Belvoir. And that was right towards the end before they moved it. So I got in one of the last courses at Belvoir, which we love Fort Belvoir, and but no more. And then from Fort Belvoir, right there, we went to Germany. We stayed there for 4 years. My son he went up through kindergarten in Germany. He went to send him to a German kindergarten. So he sprechen Sie ein bisschen Deutsch. His best buddy was one of the German kids, and he tells me this later, and not a Czechoslovakian, but a Turkish. None of them could speak, they all their own languages, but they're all learning German. So the one kid, and he said, Dad, the only thing to this day, I can't eat sauerkraut, because the German at the school, when they went to lunch, the Futzfrau would take him home with her kids and all of his friends, and every day they had sauerkraut. he said, I don't like sauerkraut, but we traveled a lot in Europe. We got to go to Switzerland quite a bit, because one of our officers was from an advanced course, was a Swiss officer, which we're partners in doing things. And we spent time in France. They went to Israel, some other places. And so we had a good time in Europe. Just loved Europe.
What was your work?
I was a company commander. So while
I'm
working,
what does that?
Well, I was in charge of a company. Well, first off, I was the executive officer when I first got there. Remember that atomic demolition school I went to?
Right. Yes.
I was the XO of a nuclear unit, which basically we did hand and placed nuclear weapons. A bomb about this big, we'd take it and we plant it someplace. It's a nuclear bomb. Okay. In other words, and what they were is we had two types, SATMs and MATMs, and all this stuff is out in the open now. It's not back then. It was all top secret. But and you could jump out of an airplane with them, do all that stuff, and it was our job to take out those big Autobahn interchanges. Go out there and set a one kiloton nuclear weapon there and take out the intersection.
Now, was that for
if the Russians were to roll across the border? Remember, we still had East and West Germany.
I just didn't know if it was because of I want to say wartime, or was it because they just wanted that bridge demolished?
Well, here's the thing: you can't. You know how much demolitions it takes to demolish even one of our interstate bridges? It's a lot, and it takes a long time. So this way, what they had is all of the bridges over there were pre-chambered, which means that there's a door. You go up and open the door, you place the bomb in, set the timer, and you go away, and it takes out the whole place.
Do you just plant it there, and then when you decide you want to blow it up, then you blow it up?
No, you'd plant it there if you had orders. And when you did that, it's for real. Now, we practiced quite a bit, and we had dummies. We all had dummy weapons and everything. And since I was the XO, I had to actually go to Oberammergau to the actual bunkers and get the serial numbers and verify every stinking weapon that we had, to make sure, yep, that's this is this one, I got them. So. And we practice Larry to advance is what our alerts were. And all the time we just call them, and, didn't matter what time of night it was, what time of day it was, 30 minutes we had to get from our bunk to where we had to go to be in our GDP. or general defensive positions. Because you remember back in those days, we thought the Russians were going to be rolling across that border coming from, and there would be no stopping them. We practiced that all the time in the 80s.
So now, how long did you do that?
4 years. And I didn't do that 4 years. I did that for about a year and a half. Then I was a company commander. I was in charge of a combat engineer company. Now we're putting in mines and so forth. And we supported the 354th Panzer Division of the Panzer Battalion tanks for the Germans. So we worked with the Germans and had a great time with those guys.
Did you learn German?
Sprechen Sie ein bisschen Deutsch? Ich bin ein Wo ist der Bahnhof, wo ist der Rechtslake? Just enough to get me by so that they would say, oh, and they'd always come back with English, you know. They appreciate the fact that you tried.
What did you do after the bomb group?
I was a company commander, and then from there I went to be the brigade executive officer, and then from there we came back to the States. And I got promoted to major from there, went back to the States, and went to, actually came back, before I got promoted, I came back to the States. I was a tactics instructor at Aberdeen Proving Grounds in Maryland. And that's where we did, they'd fix all the vehicles and they got all the bombs and rockets and all that kind of stuff there. And I taught the advanced course, tactics.
What are tactics?
Basically, it's what you teach, what's at that time it was the airland battle doctrine. So what is our doctrine? How do we fight? How do we fight in an integrated war? How do we fight with other units? What's the deep battle? What's the close battle? And we go through, with each advanced class, we go through about a 2-week course on just going through all of that. And we had different classes that we taught in that, but we're giving them I guess not the deep dive, but a big overview of so forth so they can understand. And then we take them out on an exercise problem to exercise.
When they're going through this course, what are they preparing to do?
They are going through their advanced course. They're preparing for them, they were ordnance officers, maintenance officers, repair vehicles, that type of thing. So they're preparing themselves to become senior staff officers and senior commanders.
And go where?
Wherever they're going to go. You'd get a class of about maybe 30, 40, 50 officers, men and women. And at the end of their course, they'd get their orders. This one's going to Germany. This one's going to here. This one's going to Fort Podunk, wherever they're going. And they go to their next assignments. And then the one thing I liked about the military is that you can map out your career, and it's one of those, if you want, you get second lieutenant, first lieutenant, captain. Here's the things you got to do. Here's the courses you got to go to. And here's the time frame you've got to do that. And the way they went from being lifetime privates or lifetime lieutenants is that it's called up or out. You'd either do these things and move up, or out you go. A lot of people you see, I was in for 5, 6, 8 years, didn't like it, they didn't want to move up or whatever. That's fine, and they get out. Your goal was to continue to move up. I was always looking to move up. I was after every course, I had this insatiable appetite. I went to airborne Ranger school, and I didn't have to go to any of those courses. It was one of the hardest courses I ever been through in my life was Ranger school. And, it's just, what am I doing here? Halfway through it, it's like. What was Ranger school about? It's Navy SEALs. The Rangers are the Army's version of a Navy SEAL. It's one huge brother and sisterhood. And, and that's the thing that I miss, is the fact that people, they had your back, you had their back. You can walk into a room, know where you stand because where everybody's ranked. Sergeant, captain, colonel, there you go. And we're all there for the one good. Did you feel that anyone was in it for the wrong reasons? Oh, sure. Just any career, they're in for the wrong reason. But, they get weeded out. Most of them. Some of them don't. But, again, I've never seen a better process back when I was in. I can't vouch for today. I'm sure it's the same. But as far as how to promote people fairly, equally, make sure that you're looking at all the different factors. Our military, whether it's the Army, the Navy, Marines, they all have that common thread of unity. Mm-hmm. And they all have one goal, and that's to protect our country, to protect ourselves, and to protect the guy next to us. Yeah. Well, let's not forget that. I'll tell you, some of the times, because when I was sick or something, I realized I'd say, you know what? Thank God the Army's taking care of me. I'm home laying in bed, I'm on sick quarters or whatever it is, my paycheck is still coming, my bills are going to get paid, I'm going to get over this and I get up and go do my thing. But they took care of us, not only physically but mentally, as far as the time for church services, time for doctors, whatever what made you had to do, they was there for you.
Did you ever think that you were going to go to the front lines?
Well, I tell you, I remember when I joined up, my whole goal in life at that point was to get out of Flint, Michigan and see the world for 2 years and then come back and figure out something. Well, I got in and I liked it. So I stayed.
What was the most rewarding part of your service?
The most rewarding part of my service is just being when you're recognized for a job well done. I mean, when you're promoted. I mean, when I was promoted to every rank that you go.
You felt that sense of pride.
Yes,
and reward.
Pride, reward, recognition that you've done a good job.
And because you worked so hard to get there.
Yes.
What was the most challenging part?
Physically challenging all the time. I mean, when you come in, you get PT tests, you're always on the go, on the move. And if I'd actually thought about it, it'd be one of those daunting things going to Ranger School. How I got to go, when I was in officer candidate school, we had 7 platoons, and we're all just same rank, just because we're going to be officers. We're just no ranks. And they came out one day and they said, all right, when you're done with this officer, anybody that graduates here, who would like to go to airborne school? And I'm thinking, not me. I'm going, but my buddy, Pete Holloway, was standing next to me. He says, come on, Mike, let's go do that. Come on. I'll go with you. Let's go. So we put our hands up. Okay. And then he goes, now who wants to go to Ranger School? I thought, but not me. And Pete goes, come on, Mike, come on. So all right, so I'll go with you. So we raised our hands, that camaraderie. So now we had to, that Sunday, this was like on a Friday. So that Sunday, when everybody got off in the morning to relax and go to church or do whatever you're going to do, we had to fall out and go take this horrible PT test. Swimming, running, all that. By the time I was done, I was, but I passed. They ran me through the ringer. And so I go back, I'm going, I'm just laying, and then here comes Pete. I go, oh man, I finally passed. And he goes, well, and he's standing there, and I said, what? And he goes, I didn't pass. I'm not going to go. I said, So the whole thing, I went, he didn't. And there were several times during Ranger School I wanted to just say quit, because if you said the word quit, they'd throw you out. But I didn't. So
how were your later years in the military?
Oh, I went in as a private, and I came out as a full colonel. So the later years were great. Once I hit Desert Storm, then it was just seemed one combat tour after another with all the stuff that's been going on in the world. I hit Iraq, Afghanistan. I was the district engineer here in St. Louis for the Corps of Engineers, and I had 30 years in. And my retirement paperwork, I just put it in, and they just hit the Twin Towers. And so I got a phone call that day from the chief of the engineers in Washington, D.C. And I'm in the staff room with my staff down at the federal building. And this secretary, she comes in, she goes, Colonel, she says, General Flowers is on the phone for you. I go, oh my gosh. And I looked around the room to all these people, all civilians, and I says, okay, tell me quick, what'd you do? Who messed up? This guy doesn't call anything. No, they couldn't. Okay, so I go down there. Typically, the way it goes is that it's when the general calls, they got the general's aide who's holding the phone until he gets on there. So I finally get in and pick it up. This Colonel Morrow, he goes, hi, Mike, this is Bob Flowers. It was the general. I goes, yes, sir. And he says, just want to let you know I got your retirement paperwork up here. And now, like, I couldn't think of anything else, like a dummy. I says, oh, well, is everything okay? He goes, yeah, it's fine. He said, but I want you to pull it. Now, by law, only I could pull it because once it goes in. And I said, okay. And he says, here's the reason. I can't tell you on an unsecure line, but I want you to be the CENTCOM engineer and take charge of all the engineering for Afghanistan. And we were going into Iraq and another country and some other things up there to be my number 2. Oh my gosh. I says, how long? And another dummy, I was, well, how long do I got? He says, about 5 minutes. I said, well, in that case, I'll be happy to do it. So we changed command quickly, and I got on a C-17 with the general, and we flew into Afghanistan and Uzbekistan and all the rest of the places. And that started my 2-year stint over there, become the CENTCOM engineer. We basically ran all the engineering and everything for all the staffs,
Yeah.
all the, reported up to the General Franks at the time was the CENTCOM engineer, and then they changed him out. So it was interesting, but it was one of those that, you spend your whole time in. It's like a firefighter when you're waiting for the bell to ring. Finally, the bell rings, of course I'm going to go. I'm not going to. So stayed in for 32 years, and then finally retired out of there.
How did it feel to retire?
It was interesting. I was in CENTCOM, so it was down in Florida. And she flew out with my son, and they told me the war's on. Everybody's so busy. They ain't time for me. And they said, oh, well, tomorrow's your retirement. We got Brigadier General so-and-so going to do it. And I'm thinking, oh, geez, typically, you've got the commanding general or somebody that does that, because I'm a full colonel. I was in charge of all this stuff. And I just thought, they're brushing me out the door. I said, okay, yep, whatever, it'll work. So the next day we get there, and here's my little family, and we got a few friends, all my staff and everybody are out there and that. And I'm just kind of sitting there thinking, well, we'll get this over with, and then I'll go home. And then I look back, and in walked General Flowers, the chief of the engineers. He flew all the way down there for this. He came in and he says, yeah, he says, you don't think I'm going to let you out the door like that? Yeah. So how did it feel? It felt great. One, I was sad to leave. I wanted to stay forever. But at some point, it's, you got to go.
That's a good send-off.
Yeah.
Where were you living at the time?
Down in Tampa, just in an apartment down there. And then got out of there and moved up here to Illinois in Fairview Heights. I was going to start my own consulting firm and so forth. But I ended up mentoring CEOs of their companies. It started off with an aviation company in Bethalto down there. This guy heard that I was there through a different thing. Anyway, he called me up, can you help me out? And I says, yeah. I came down, and he says, well, I got all these problems. And I says, let me take a look at your company. So I took the weekend or whatever, how many days, and went through it and all that. And I wrote up a report, and I went back to him and gave him the paper. It was just one pager. And he sat down, he started reading it like this. You can see his face is he's getting more mad. Finally, he took the paper, crumpled it, threw it all right there, and he goes, according to you, I can't do a damn thing right. And I says, that's not what the paper said. I said, you got a lot of things that are wrong. And the biggest one is you got your two sons right here that are running the place into the ground. You got the one who's chasing this gal up in the engineering department. You got the other one sitting in the tool room playing on his video phone. Well, but they're going to college. And I says, why don't you consider giving them a sabbatical? What's that? And I says, send them off to school, pay for their school, pay their salaries. And when the engineer gets out, send him to Boeing for about 4 or 5 years to get a little stuff under his belt and come back to the mom and pop shop, And so he said, He said, can you help me out? And I says, yeah, I'll be happy to come in and consult for you. So I ended up, he was just one of many. I had Gray Bar Electric help them. Their government programs. And I had usually ended up with probably about 5 or 6 consultants at that point doing that. So we were doing really well. And then at that point, though, then one of them, that same guy that I first started with, I stayed with him the whole time. I'd go in maybe once a week or something, just sit, shoot the breeze, have coffee, look over the books, talk to all the people, let them know where the problems are. So one day he called me in, and we're sitting there, and he says, can you sell my company? I says, yeah, we can do that. We'll do that for you. So I had to, long story short, had to hire a couple attorneys, clean up a bunch of stuff, got a bunch of people in. It took us about 6 months because of some stuff that was, but anyway, sold it off to a big group called Triumph, and we stole it for $35 million. And the contract was about this thick, but then I got to the middle of the contract, and it said, this contract is only void if I came on as the president for this company and the one in South Carolina. So I says, I've got to leave what I'm doing and do this, and I think I'm in the driver's seat. But anyway, so I said, I will do that. And so I closed out my consulting firm, which it was about time because I'd been doing it about 5 years. And what I realized was that I was always looking for the next job and not being able to help the people I want to help that we're working with because have somebody else do that. So This way, I was able to focus on both of those, solve a lot of long-term problems, and consolidate. We got rid of the stuff in Illinois, consolidated out in South Carolina, and then down the road after that, a couple, 3-4 years, had a big sale out there, and moved them in with another group. So, and they said, now we got another. I said, no, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm happy with what you're going to pay me, and I'll hit the road. So I came back here, and then next thing you know, I'm sitting here. I'm the mayor.
What made you come to Grafton?
My wife. Now, at some point prior to that, afterwards, the first wife and I, we finally split. One of the things back in 1999, when I was the district engineer, I permitted the Towboat Festival for Grafton. As that, because all the boats coming up the river, so they had a little festival. So I permitted. The ladies came up to the office up there, and they explained it. We said, yeah, we permitted it and all that. So I did that for 3 years, gave them their annual permit. So when I came back from Afghanistan and Iraq and all those places, the newspaper here in the area did a big write-up on me. And they said, oh, he's back, Colonel's back, blah, 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 all that stuff. So Debbie Wedding saw that, and she called me up, and she says, we've got our Towboat Festival coming up in 2 weeks. Would you like to be the guest of honor? Well, that sounds like fun. We're going on a dinner cruise Friday night, blah, blah, blah. And I says, okay, what, she gave me the details. And I said, I'll see you then. So it was about 4 days before the event. She calls me back, and yep, I'm still ready, got set, da, da, da. And she goes, oh, by the way, I hope you don't mind, but we got a hostess for you. I'm thinking, oh yeah, right. So I almost canceled. I almost came up and said, oh, I got something, but I finally said, oh, all right, I'll do that. So came up, and as I pulled up to the loading dock down there, I had my sport coat on and tie, and I realized I was overdressed. So I'm standing out by my car, and I'm taking off my tie, and this little Subaru pulls in right next to me. There's 4 ladies in it, and I'm watching the one that's driving, and she's a cutie. I'm thinking, this is not too bad. And I get out, and I take my tie off, and I watch her. She walks off, and I go, okay. And I said, well, let me go find Debbie and find out who she's hooked me up with, right? So I see Debbie standing over here, so I start walking towards her, and this woman turns and starts going towards Debbie also. And I thought, no, this can't be. I'm not that lucky. Well, anyway, I was. It was her. She goes, this is your chaperone, or you want to call it, tonight. And I said, so we went and had a lovely time on the boat that night, and I got a big, how you get a plus, you don't even know it. I got a couple of pluses. One, because they came by and they said, what would you like to drink? I said, well, I think I have an iced tea. And I said, well, I don't drink. I said, bing. So we had a good dinner and all that. And so when we were done, we got off, and I said, well, would you care to go out to dinner with me tomorrow night? She goes, no. I'm thinking, we didn't have a good time. She goes, I've got to work the festival tomorrow. She says, would you like to come work the festival with me? I says, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that's better. So we ended up dating for about 2-3 years, and I think it was 2.5, something like that. And then we got married. Used to be in Washington, D.C., lived in St. Louis, and her husband passed, and then up here in Grafton as a getaway. And then, so yeah, we consolidated, and that was it. So we blended our families, my son and his 5 grandchildren, her 2 children, Michael and his wife Susan, and Dave and Chrissy, and their 2 children.
You've been in Grafton for how long?
I've been associated with Grafton since 1999.
Right.
When I was district engineer, I moved to Grafton and lived here in 2007.
What made you want to become mayor?
I didn't. The first time I ran, I got defeated because they said, you ought to run. A couple people said, and I said, yeah, I could give that a shot. I ran, didn't have anybody supporting me really, kind of my own organization, doing as I thought I'd do it. It just isn't that big a town. It's like a battalion. Lost miserably. So the next time it comes up, they came back, and the guy that was running wasn't running. There's another guy running. I says, no, I'm not going to run. Well, there were some issues. There's why, and so I said, I'm not going to run. But the former mayor, one of them, came up to talk to me, and he says, we've got a group of people together. We want you to run. We'll support you. We'll work it. And which they did. And so, and it was a really hard campaign. We won. And so here I sit.
And what year was that?
2021. I put out a quarterly newsletter that I write and goes out to everybody in the county and the city, so they all know what's going on, keep them up. They get four newsletters a year projects, things going on, grants and stuff like that. And also too, when I came in, we didn't have anything as far as live broadcasting. Since day one, all of our city hall meetings are on YouTube, and they're all recorded. They're archived. You can go back and look at them.
What else do you do in your spare time? Or do you not have spare time?
Well, my wife is a Christian Science practitioner, so she has no spare time. She basically takes calls and so forth throughout the day and into the evening. I just got back from visiting the grandkids up in Tennessee. One of your questions you said was, was anybody in the family followed? Well, my father was Navy. My son went with me on one of the exercises when I was a battalion commander when he was in high school. And I said, son, you're getting the royal treatment because everybody here is treating you well because you're with the battalion commander. I said, but you got to. So he decided that he went to a different career. He was in college, and then he went and joined the police department in Lexington, Kentucky. So he spent 20 years as a police officer, made sergeant, and then retired, and then was picked up by Amazon. And I still don't understand what he does. He's a project manager, I guess, for global security. And anything that has to do, he's working with drones, he's working with all the cameras and all the other kind of stuff, and it all comes up through him. So he's happy as a hoot. He's brilliant on the computer. I still remember I says, that's because I bought you that first Mario Brothers thing, boing. And every time I have an issue, even with the city, I call him up. I said, hey, right before a meeting one time, I was pitting my stomach, it wasn't working. I called him up. He said, Dad, what did I tell you? Look, okay, here's what you do. And I did. Thank you.
You have some things going on here for
Yes,
the military?
We do. As a matter of fact, what we've got is it's the National Memorial Military Ascent. It's like I wear my patch here. That we're going to be putting in a national memorial. It'll have 12 life-size bronze statues of the Rangers that climbed the cliffs of Point du Hoc on D-Day on World War II. And that's going to be out here on our cliffs, right as you come into town by the Visitor Center. And we'll also have a military museum, and it's going to be fantastic. The wife and I got to go over there 3 times on Omaha Beach. We have a friend that's over there. She's one of our commissioners now. And each time we were there on the 70th anniversary of D-Day, I was honored to give a speech on D-Day on Omaha Beach to the Bedford Association from Bedford, Virginia at their annual dinner up that night. When I was going over, I just retired, and they said, our friend over there says, well, bring your uniform. I says, I don't know if it fits. I said, all right. So we packed it up and went over there, and I thought I was just going to give a quick little, tutorial or something. And they said, oh, no, you're going to be the keynote speaker. It's going to be filmed. It's going to be translated on Omaha Beach on D-Day. And I said, oh my gosh. So I had to go through and rewrite my speech, because I just had a few notes. But that was good. But when we were there, we saw Point du Hoc. We saw all of the areas. I mean, the French people. One of the things, I made friends with the mayor of Brickney, and he'd through interpreters, he'd say, anything you want. What do you want to do? And I says, I'd love to visit a French dairy farm. So, we were over there for about 10 days. And so he set up one day where he took us out, and we visited, I think, 5 different farms. Oh, it was just fantastic. The different things that they do that we do, but it's all, kind of interacted the same. And it was just a wonderful time. So we saw Point du Hoc, and we learned the story. And so when we came back after the 2019 75th, I was driving down the River Road with my wife, and I told Lynn, we passed the bluffs, and I looked up, we were talking, I said, hey, look, Point du Hoc. And she goes, oh my gosh. So that thought started that. And then when I became mayor, first thing we did was we got with the city council. The council was gracious enough to go ahead and approved us to have a commission set up to explore ways to honor our veterans. Now, Grafton is made up of, at that time, 17% of the population of Grafton are veterans, the largest per capita in the state of Illinois. Most of those are Vietnam veterans. So when we were looking at how to do this, we thought, how can we tie in Point du Hoc? So the commission, we had at that time 20 commissioners, and we all met, and we went everywhere, and we looked, and we ended up out at the bluffs, and we talked through it all, and we came up with the plan. And we worked it, and then I met Jamie Henderson, the architect, on a different project, and he mind melded with us, and we came up with sketches, and it just one after another after another. Well, it was going to turn out, it's going to be a $6 million project. And we had no money, no nothing, and we're rolling, and we didn't want to take taxpayer money. And I said, what we did was we set up a 501c3, and the 501c3 is going to build this, and it's going to be a gift to the city of Grafton. as you know, because it's going to be at the visitor center. We'll incorporate the visitor center. We'll operate together. We'll work all this. And the money started rolling in. We had the first few people that dropped off. My wife and I dropped some money. Our treasurer dropped some money to get a seed started, to get some consultant things in, to get some other stuff rolling. And today we are a little over $3 million that we have. And we're still looking to get that 6, but the statues, as we speak right today, are being poured in North Carolina. And North Carolina Bronze are the ones that are doing the statues. And when we interviewed them, Jamie and I did, we were talking about, well, what do you do? And finally, the Melissa Walker and Ed, her husband, they own the foundry. She says, well, are we going to be your foundry? And I looked at Jamie and he nodded. And we said, yes, you are. Because we like what you're doing. We like your pricing, all the rest. And she says, well, good. Because we've done our homework. And we've checked every foundry that we know in the world. And there is no other project like this in the world. And we want in. We've been working with them, and so how do you do 12 life-size statues of people climbing cliffs? So what we did was we put out a casting call, and last June on D-Day, over that D-Day weekend, we had the 2nd Ranger Battalion of St. Louis, which is a reenactment group here in St. Louis, and they reenact Pointe du Hoc. So they're now members of us, they're part of our project, and they came out over that weekend with the foundry folks, and we got young men, because they all said, Mayor, you dress up. No, not me. To get the young guys. So we got these young people to come out and dress up in the uniforms and go and strike the poses that we wanted on the cliff. So as they stood there doing this, they came up with a digital scanner, and it took them about 2 hours, and they'd scan. Ed was over on the computer working as it came in, the data and so forth, and then they get the scan done. They took that scan back to North Carolina. They worked it somehow on their computers and so forth, and then they sent it out to Washington State. And in Washington out there, what they did was they went ahead and put it through a 3D printer in sections. And these sections then came back to the foundry, and they then put those sections together and they start pouring. So the first one is the radio man. And the radio man was in a kneeling position talking on a radio with a actual World War II radio on his back, which we got from another reenactor. What ties that into it is that because our chaplain of this organization is a Native American, and he is right now living in Mexico with his family, but he is the Native American practitioner for, I forget the long terminology for it, but basically for the veterans in the United States. And he is working to get the tribes in this area from the headwaters of the Mississippi all the way down through tied into this. And you know how they're going to be tied into? But number one, this was their land. But the radio man is going to tie them in because of the code talkers. The code talkers, and there were 17 code talkers on Omaha Beach, none on Pointe du Hoc. Really? And then there was the Navajo, the Cheyenne, and so forth. But do you know when the code talkers first started doing this? Actually, it was World War I. Was when it started. Just the history of that and getting the people, we're excited. We've been up to the headwaters and we've seen that their traditions and so forth. And we've asked that when we set this up to do it, that we have a Native American color guard. I've seen their ceremonies. And we've got an area set off to the side for them for, as he calls it, the powwow area and so forth for ceremonies and so on, which ties them back in. So
when do you think that the project will be done?
Well, here's our timing. Is right now the statues will be ready to be installed on the cliff face in the spring of 2026. And where our grand dedication at that point is going to be June 2026. And what else will be finished then? We'll have the plaza up there. We're going to have a granite wall with names for founding sponsors. You can be a founding sponsor for $1,000. We're only taking 5,000 of those. Your name will be on the wall. Then we'll have sustaining members and so on. But that'll be finished. Say we got the first 3 million. The other 3 million is going to be for the museum and the other pieces that go with this. But it's going to be fantastic. We're rolling through with it. We've got Tarleton Corporation in St. Louis, which is doing our construction management. Mike Jones is our project construction manager, and he came on board donating his time. SMS Engineers out of Alton, Illinois. They've came on board and they've donated all of their time. They've done all the LiDAR surveys. They've done all the topographical surveys. and they're there for us every step of the way with all the engineering needs that we need. We've already had other firms step up that want to, once it's built, they want to do the landscaping, they want to be doing this. So it's a community project that's just taken hold. Our veterans have, and if you've seen our webpage, you go on there and see just a glimpse of some of the veterans groups that are supporting. I've given this a presentation last year to the state convention at the Illinois American Legion, and they passed a state resolution of support, and we've over 750 some posts in Illinois, and we sent letters, and they're sending money in to help us. I'm also a member of the VFW. My post is 1596 in Collinsville. They're going to be putting on a fundraiser for us this year. We've had a fundraiser last year. Our American Legion post is putting on a fundraiser on D-Day up at their post. So the veterans are all behind it. We need people to continue to give the money because we're not taking government money. We're not taking federal money or state money, because this is the project from everybody. And now it's just not going to be World War II, because we're going to have a Vietnam fast boat up sitting in there right by the museum that was made right here at the loading dock, which was then called the Grafton Boat Works. So that'll be setting up there so they can come up and look at it. We'll have the dinghy. Well, it's going to be fantastic. And IDOT has been our partner through all of this, working on traffic studies and so forth, working on where things can go as far as the land. The property is IDOT's that were there with the museum on the right of way and everything, but been great with us to work through all of that. So
all the years that I have driven to Grafton, those bluffs have always looked like they needed to be representative of something. I mean, they're just like empty bluffs. It's like a beautiful landscape that is just like sitting there.
It's one of those that comes down to a 1964 Supreme Court ruling from the state of Illinois that they don't want them messed up. So that's why instead of where we want to put them, we're going to be moving them a little bit over here on private property, still be part of the actual museum and everything. And where we wanted to put them originally on our drawing, what we're going to do there that is we're going to have the flag poles come up. Then they have all the flags there. We'll have the down below the Army, Navy, the little whatever it's going to be there to support those. And then at some point we'll have a hologram that goes up onto the wall.
I love it.
Boom. So, and Jamie's already talking. We'll have three here, the center for this. I said, great. And so, we're excited about it. And then the actual people climbing, we'll have a bunker. We've got a German soldier throwing a hand grenade down. You can get right up to it. It's not one of those where you're going to be looking, you walk right up to them. Warren, our Native American, when the radio man is finished, we're going to add one touch to it. It'll be the sacred turtle. And that'll go somewhere down by the... So we're excited with it. It's a lot of work, a lot of good people working on it, but, graftonmemorial.org.
Well, thank you for talking to me.
Diana, thank you. Thank you for coming out.
If you are a veteran, or if you know someone who is, I urge you to share your story. Whether you fought in battle or worked behind the scenes, your experience matters. It's not just history, it's our history. It's a history we cannot afford to lose. At Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel, we are committed to preserving these stories, but we need your help. Subscribe, share it with your friends and family. And most importantly, if you have a story to tell, reach out to us on social media or email. Both are listed in our description. Every veteran story deserves to be heard, remembered, and honored. So join us in this journey. Together, we can ensure that the legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel live on. This is Diana Mall Halstead, the Kriege's daughter, signing off. Thank you for listening, and to all veterans, thank you from the bottom of my heart for your service and your sacrifice. If you would like to purchase a copy of my dad's memoir, Writings from the Barbed Wire Hotel, click the link in the description. In the back of almost 800 pages is an index of all the sources I used to research my dad's military career and time as a prisoner of war. Let's spread the word and keep these stories alive. And remember, every story matters, especially yours. Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel was written by and produced by Diana Mall Halstead, the Kriege's daughter. Until next time, this is Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel. Stay safe, stay strong, and never forget the sacrifices made for our freedom. Thanks for listening.